According to a report by The Guardian in the UK, it is highly likely that the ultimate real cost the United States will have to pay for this war will exceed $1 trillion. Today, let's take a closer look at this topic. Let's get right into it. On April 21st, The Guardian in the UK published an editorial titled, "The True Cost of the Iran War: Bombs Kill People, but so do Economic Consequences." But in the article, it says that costs accumulate over time, and while the pain is widespread, it is never shared evenly. It analyzed that the rising costs of energy, food, and fertilizer will increasingly hit poor countries and those highly dependent on imports. It also evaluated that Iran's economy has already been under sanctions for many years and is in a state of national failure and despair, so no matter how much the US attacks, even if things get worse from that already desperate state, the Iranian people won't feel much difference. First of all, before we get started properly, the United States is currently enforcing a maritime blockade against Iran. Because of this, it's clear that Iran is also suffering significant damage. They are losing about 590 billion won every day. Especially since about 90% of Iran's economy relies on maritime trade, it's clear that just the counter-blockade of the Hormuz Strait is dealing a significant blow to Iran. But the problem is that the United States is also suffering considerable losses. Let's look at the confirmed figures first. According to the US Department of Defense, in just 6 days since the start of the Middle East war, about 16.7 trillion won has been spent. This amount covers the cost of operating aircraft carrier strike groups, precision-guided bombs, cruise missiles, and fighter jet sorties. However, this figure is likely lower than the actual cost. Military experts point out that the initial cost estimates are always announced conservatively. Ammunition use, emergency maintenance, and supply line costs often aren't shown in real time. Considering that the war did not end in 6 days but continued much longer, the total cost is bound to increase exponentially. With hundreds of billions of won being spent every day, the longer the conflict continues, the greater the escalating burden. Additionally, when considering troop sustainment, overseas deployments, and rising fuel costs, actual spending could grow to several times the official figures. Another important point to note is equipment losses. The expensive air defense systems and strategic assets deployed by the US military have been damaged by attacks from the Iranian side. A representative example is the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, or THAAD, which costs several $billions just to set up a single battery. If any of these assets are damaged or need replacement, it causes significant extra costs, including maintenance. Recent reports say Iranian attacks damage these air defense systems, likely raising costs further. This is especially true since modern warfare relies heavily on equipment. Each missile launch, drone deployment, or interception activation costs hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. If Iran continues to attack using asymmetric tactics, the United States will be forced to respond with much more expensive defensive measures. As this difference grows, the financial burden on the United States will become increasingly burdensome. In addition, it was assessed that if you add the impact of this war on the US economy, the cost will increase even more. According to estimates by the American Enterprise Institute, the total cost that the average US household will have to bear due to this war is $605,000 won per household. But the problem is, it's not just the United States that is suffering from this. Due to the aftermath of rising oil prices and other factors, other countries have also started to suffer. For example, it's known that British households will have to bear a cost of 960,000 won. The United Nations Development Program reports Arab countries face an economic contraction of 177 to 286 trillion won. And the damage doesn't end here. Fertilizer prices have nearly doubled compared to March. When this happens, it disrupts crop production. The World Food Program predicts that over 45 million more people, mainly in Asia and Africa, will face severe food shortages. In addition, there is a possibility that more farmers could abandon production altogether. If farming isn't profitable, more farmers may quit, potentially causing a cycle of decreasing food supply. If this happens, it could go beyond a simple price increase and actually lead to food shortages in some regions. The bigger problem is that even if this war ends right now, the economic shock won't stop immediately. The war may stop, but the market won't return to normal right away. A prime example of this is the Strait of Hormuz. This strait is a vital route for global oil transport, and oil tankers typically take weeks to travel from origin to destination through it. Since shipments have already been blocked or delayed during the war, a supply gap is inevitable for some time even after the war ends. Another important factor is market sentiment. Even if there is an announcement that the war is over, investors and companies do not immediately feel reassured. Because there is still anxiety that conflict could break out again at any time, there is a tendency to stockpile more raw materials, and this leads to even greater price volatility. Especially unless tensions in the Middle East are completely resolved, it is highly likely that the energy market will continue to remain unstable. Therefore, even if the war ends now, economic recovery will still take a long time. The supply disruptions that have already occurred, increased transportation costs, and unstable market sentiment are working together in a complex way, so the damage is bound to continue to be felt over time. The main problem is the war doesn't seem likely to end soon. President Trump said Iran's government is deeply divided and the ceasefire will continue until Iran presents a united negotiation proposal. He also said he ordered our military to keep the blockade and stay ready in all areas, making it clear the counter-blockade in the Hormuz Strait will continue. In response, Iran expressed its opposition and stated its intention to continue the blockade of the Hormuz Strait. There have also been incidents where ships attempting to pass through the Hormuz Strait were attacked or seized. Mahdi Mohammadi, an advisor to Speaker Ghalibaf, who was the head of Iran's first negotiation team, stated that it is time for Iran to take the initiative. He also urged that the continued maritime blockade by the United States is virtually no different from a military attack, so Iran should respond with military action. Iranian state television reported after President Trump's ceasefire extension announcement that Iran would not recognize the extension and would act in its national interests. This is actually a ceasefire of a ceasefire, but the most important thing, the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz still hasn't been lifted. The path to a permanent agreement that would end the war is also uncertain. The ceasefire is being maintained in an ambiguous state. The Wall Street Journal reports that the high-risk standoff between the two countries has made negotiations to end the conflict that has claimed thousands of lives and dealt a major blow to the global economy even more difficult. Furthermore, according to the Washington Post, Iran may have installed more than 20 mines in the Strait of Hormuz, and some of them are GPS-guided or remotely deployed, making them difficult to detect. However, it is expected that these mines can only be removed after the war with Iran is over. Removing these mines is expected to take 6 months. This is a very serious situation. As this continues, concerns are rising that Middle East energy supply issues and oil price burdens may persist. Although President Trump claimed to have eliminated Iran's Navy and Air Force, it was later revealed that the Revolutionary Guard Navy's small vessels used for asymmetric warfare are still active. Because of this, the Strait of Hormuz inevitably remained blocked. The problem is, the greater the damage to the United States, the higher the internal political risks become. When war costs rise, public opinion is shaken first. In the United States, many already question why this war is being fought. If people learn that hundreds of trillions of won are spent on an overseas war while prices and living costs rise, the public will be furious. Right now, people don't even have enough money to live, and the war is putting an even bigger burden on them, especially for the middle class and low-income groups. The impact of this anger is much greater, so the backlash is likely to spread even faster. This trend has happened before. During the Iraq War, the long conflict and rising costs strongly affected US public opinion and election outcomes. Initially, approval ratings stayed up because of security concerns, but over time, war fatigue and economic pressures grew, causing public sentiment to shift quickly. As the war continues, the main question grows: why must we keep fighting? This inevitably raises issues of political responsibility. Additionally, if war ties up government finances, it also impacts domestic policies. That's because things like welfare expansion, infrastructure investment, and education budgets are likely to be pushed to the back burner. When this happens, people's quality of life gets worse, and dissatisfaction grows. As divisions start to emerge within the political sphere, conflicts can intensify, and with elections approaching, the war itself could become a major issue. If this situation continues, it could go beyond just a drop in approval ratings and actually weaken the momentum for pushing policies forward. It will become harder for the administration to push things through forcefully, and as opposition voices grow louder in the legislature, there is also a possibility that the war strategy or diplomatic direction could become unstable. Furthermore, with the midterm elections coming up soon in the United States, and after causing such a major incident before the elections, I think the Trump administration might try to take some kind of gamble to make up for it.